Hello everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you for being here today. So this morning, Minister Sidhu and Commissioner Šefčovič co-chaired the 5th meeting of the Canada-EU Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement Joint Committee. This media session will provide an opportunity for the co-chairs to reflect on this morning's meeting and report directly to the public to outline the achievements from this past year and decisions jointly made. You will have the opportunity to ask some questions of the CETA Joint Committee co-chairs shortly, but first the co-chairs will join us in the signature of 2 key items. In accordance with Article 26.3 of CETA on decision-making of the Joint Committee, the Joint Committee shall have the power to make decisions in respect of all matters when the agreement so provides. And this article clarifies that decisions of the Joint Committee should be made by mutual consent, which the co-chairs agreed to during this morning's meeting. So please join us in welcoming Minister Sidhu and Commissioner Šefčovič to sign the adopted outcomes of this morning's Joint Committee. Our first order of business today is the signature of Interpretation Number 1 of 2026 of the CETA Joint Committee regarding several provisions of Chapter 8, Investment, of the Canada-EU Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. The interpretation on investment reflects the shared intention of the parties to clarify the meaning of specific provisions in Chapter 8, including with respect to fair and equitable treatment, climate change and the right to regulate, calculation of monetary damages, and indirect expropriation. The interpretation on investment serves to ensure that parties can regulate to achieve legitimate policy objectives, such as in the framework of climate, energy, and health policies. Our second order of business today is the signature of Decision Number 1 of 2026 of the CETA Joint Committee, which proposes supplemental rules establishing expedited procedure for the resolution of investment disputes, particularly for natural persons and small and medium-sized enterprises. This decision will increase the accessibility to CETA's investment dispute mechanism for individuals and SMEs, reduce costs associated with dispute resolution, and establish expedited procedures under Chapter 8 to support an inclusive approach to trade and investment, consistent with commitments in the Joint Interpretive Instrument and EU Statement Number 36. Again, I will invite the Commission. Thank you. Thank you. I'll now invite Minister Sidhu and Commissioner Šefčovič to the podium to offer remarks. Beginning with you, Minister Sidhu, please.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour et tous, Commissioner Šefčovič. Thank you so much for being here in Toronto and for your warm friendship. And let me start with the number, 75%. That is how much Canada's goods trade with the European Union has grown since the CETA trade agreement has come into force in 2017, almost 9 years ago. Not 7, not 17, but 75%. And trade and services close to 100% growth. And that is not a headline. That is real contracts, real exports, and real jobs for both Canadians and those in the European Union. I spent years working in the international trade business, helping businesses navigate new markets before entering politics, and I know what a trade agreement looks like when it works and when it doesn't. CETA works. 99% of EU tariff lines gone, red tape cut, 450 million European consumers open for Canadian business, and the best agreements don't stand still. They grow, they adapt, and they deliver more over time. And that is exactly what today is about. Here's what we're announcing and what it means for Canadians. First, stronger investment protections for small businesses. We are clarifying rules on fair treatment and investment protections and making it easier for small and medium-sized businesses, not just big multinationals, to access those protections and resolve disputes. Trade has to work for small business owners in Hamilton, not just boardrooms here in downtown Toronto. Second, better pharmaceutical supply chains. We are improving how Canada and the EU recognize each other's pharmaceutical inspections. Less duplications, lower costs, stronger supply chains for the medicines Canadians depend on. And third, a first for Canada and the EU. Today, we are welcoming the entry into force of a new mutual recognition agreement for architects, the first of its kind under a free trade agreement between Canada and the EU. Canadian architects can work in Europe, and European architects can work here. More opportunity, more mobility, and more careers. Fourth, we are formally launching the negotiations on the Canada-EU Digital Trade Agreement. The global economy is digital, supply chains are digital, and commerce is digital. Our trade framework needs to reflect that reality. This agreement will protect data, create predictability for businesses, and ensure Canadian companies can compete on fair terms. All of this builds on something bigger. Canada has a goal to double our non-U.S. exports by the tune of $300 billion over the next decade. This is not just an economic target, it is a strategy to reduce vulnerability, protect Canadian workers from shocks beyond our control, and build long-term resilience. And Europe is an important partner to build on this ambitious goal. The EU is our largest trading partner after the United States. Under CETA, our trade with Europe has grown faster than with the US, Mexico, and China combined. That tells you everything about the strength of this relationship and the opportunities still ahead. Every time I engage with our European partners, what I hear is clear. They want what Canada offers: Canadian resources, Canadian technology, Canadian talent, and Canadian values. And no country we have an agreement with and no country we're negotiating with has a combination of what Canada brings to the table. 31 priority critical minerals, 10 of NATO's 12 defense critical minerals, the materials the world needs for batteries, semiconductors, aerospace, and defense. This is not just resource extraction, this is economic security for Canada. And it is why partners across Europe, the Indo-Pacific, and beyond are deepening ties with Canada, not just in trade, but in strategic alignment. My job is to make sure those doors stay open, keep opening, and that Canadian workers and companies can walk through them. Today's announcements do exactly that. Commissioner Šefčovič, thank you for your leadership and, of course, your friendship, for coming to Toronto so we can continue building on our trade relationship. Over to you.
Thank you very much, my dear friend, dear Minister Sidhu. It's always a pleasure for me to be back in Canada and also here in Toronto. I really would like to thank you for the warm welcome, and I already made this personal reference several times. I remember fondly my first diplomatic posting in Canada, where I started as a young diplomat representing a newly independent Slovakia, where my daughters started the school. So for me, it's always a pleasure to be back, and just to reflect on how this also reminds me of the fact that true partnerships endure, deliver, and grow. And this is exactly what is happening between European Union and Canada, and I really would like to thank you for this excellent overview you just presented a minute ago. Today, we both co-chaired EU-Canada Joint Committee overseeing the implementation of CETA, our free trade agreement, and I have to say that first and foremost it was positive, it was productive, and it delivered tangible results. CETA remains at the very heart of our partnership, and I totally agree with the Minister. To put it plainly, CETA works. And the proof is indeed in the numbers. Some of them have been already presented by Minister Sidhu, but I just would like to highlight the fact that since CETA entered into force, our trade in goods and services dramatically surged. 76% in goods, almost 100% in services, and together we are now talking about 200 billion Canadian dollars, which is really, really very impressive results. So what I would like to say is that this is not kind of incremental growth, but this is a momentum. This is a new dynamic, and it's our common task to keep it that way. And we very much appreciate this positive trajectory, because we are living in an era of geoeconomics where trade and industrial policies increasingly shape global competition, and that was also the reality which was framing our today's discussion. My message was absolutely clear. We must preserve the privileged access we granted to each other under CETA, because this predictability is a competitive advantage worth protecting, and I think that we heard it very loud and clear also from the business stakeholders we met an hour ago. At the same time, we are also ready to take the EU-Canada partnership to the next level, notably by launching negotiations on a digital trade agreement. And I think that we heard valuable advice, suggestions, contributions from the business leaders in the sector in Canada, and I believe that they will help us to really prepare a very ambitious digital trade agreement which should make the business even faster, smoother, and even more profitable. Today, already more than 40% of our 51 billion euros or 70 billion Canadian dollars in services trade is delivered digitally. And data flows do not, and the data flows do not power tech companies alone. So we have to just simply realize that no modern economy runs without trusted, secure data flows, and that would be focus of our work. If the CETA was the foundation, the digital trade is clearly the next floor, and therefore we will be paying a lot of attention to this. Today we also celebrated another new, first of its kind, an agreement between EU and Canada, this time on mutual recognition agreement for architects. I mean, this is the first type of this agreement we signed with anyone. So I think we learned a lot in the process, and we are very happy about the results. And also in this case, there is no accident that Canada is our partner, because mutual recognition requires trust and confidence in each other's standards, education, checks and controls, and therefore the Canada was such a special and trusted partners for this cooperation as well. And I think that we concluded with my dear friend, the Minister, that we would intend to build on this experience and explore whether similar agreements could be possible in other sectors as well. Maybe the last point I would mention, because we are living in this global transformation of trade, and I would like to thank the Minister for their leadership and for the good cooperation also in the frame of CPTPP. As you know, this is a very important group gathering 12 Pacific countries. And when this group is working in partnership with the European Union, we are talking about 30% of global GDP, 40% of global trade. And I think that ideas we kind of exchanged and explored this morning, I believe would be very valuable for better cooperation within this group, but also they would have positive contribution to all the discussions we will be having very intensely in the coming weeks. And this is reform, and I believe also positive reforms within WTO. So on this note, I once again would like to thank the Minister and Canada for being the gracious host, great partners, trusted friends, and this is how we are absolutely convinced it will continue also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Šefčovič and Minister Sidhu. We will now open it up to questions from the media. Please state your name and your outlet, and please raise your hand so I can pass you the mic to ask questions. Start here.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm Nivedita with Reuters. For Minister Sidhu, Prime Minister Carney has said he would double Canada's non-US trade in a decade. What share of that would come from the EU?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I mean, doubling trade to the tune of $300 billion. We're talking to all partners, but including the European Union. It's one of our largest trading partners, and we're finding great ways to expand that, whether it's in the defense side of things, mining, agriculture, energy is a big one. If you're looking at where the growth rates are coming from, energy has grown by over 200%. Oil seeds from the agriculture industry have grown over by 200%. And so there's different industries that we're really focused on to work with the European Union. And look, it's growth all around, but it is one of our fastest growing trade agreements that we've seen in a long, long time. And it's a real proof that trade does work. When we sign FTAs, we want them to work for businesses. And this is exactly what it's doing in terms of businesses that are accessing the European Union market, but also European Union countries accessing Canada as a market for them.
Is there a rough figure or a number that you'd be able to share?
I wouldn't want to put a number on it because this is driven by businesses, right? But we're encouraging businesses to do more trade between the two. And so part of that is led with trade delegations. So I was just in Italy not too long ago with a delegation. We'll be going back to European markets again with a defense-led initiative from our defense industrial strategy. And so we're working together hand in hand. And if you look at what we're doing with the EU through the EU procurement, the safe procurement mechanism, Canada is the only non-EU country that's been welcome to join that, and so that will open up a lot of procurement opportunities for our defense industry.
Maybe if I can just add one very important element, I kind of called it the CETA dividend, because if you look at the dynamics of the growth of trade volumes between Canada and the EU, so the trade is growing between 20 to 30% faster with Canada in the area of goods and services than when we compare it to our trade relationship with the different countries, especially with those with whom we do not have the free trade agreement. So the dynamic is very strong, because if you look at where we started 8 years ago and today, I mean, the trade grew by 76% in goods and in services 100%. For the same period, if we manage, and that's our common ambition, to conclude the digital trade agreement this year. So, I mean, this would even grow. So it's very difficult to put a number on it, but the dynamic is absolutely impressive. Honestly, if I look at other trade relationship we have, I mean, it's very rare when you see, the growth potential and dynamics which already exist there. So I'm sure that we are very happy that we are your second most important trading partner. And I'm sure that the volumes in both goods and services will just grow.
All right.
Hi, Zian Lau with Politico. How are you? Thank you very much for taking our questions. I'd like to kind of ask about the digital trade negotiations. So first, what kind of timelines are you operating under, and how frequent are you going to speak negotiations, and when are you aiming to finalize talks?
Yeah, so I mean, I can start with that. I think, look, the digital trade agreement, we just launched negotiations today. We're aiming to conclude this year. We just sat down with industry groups from Shopify to OpenText, Siemens, Nokia, to hear from industry on what they would like to see in the digital trade agreement. And many of them say the same thing on predictability, making sure that there's mutual recognition of data so they can operate in the EU, but the EU companies can also operate here in Canada. But they want predictability as well. And so digital trade, if you see which way the trend lines are going, it's going to be very important that we get it right. It's going to be Canada's first digital trade agreement, and so we're very excited to work with the European Union, and I know they've done this before with other countries, and so maybe Maroš.
Yeah, I mean that was also my suggestion and also request to the business leaders we've met just a while ago, that we concluded two digital trade agreements with Singapore and South Korea, and I think in both cases this was clearly kind of urged by the fact that our trade, especially in services, is very much based on the digital basis. So I think that with the dynamics we see in trade in goods and services in Canada, I'm sure that if you can conclude this agreement, and I share the ambition of the Minister Sidhu that we should definitely do our utmost to do it this year. I mean, I think we really want to proceed very, very quickly. So then we could reap the benefits of this agreement very soon. And we already see how positive impact it has on our trading patterns with Singapore, with South Korea, and how much this is appreciated by economic operators. Because of course, we are talking about the big things, data flows, data storage, and all these, I would say, very important aspects of the economy. But we are also talking about smaller things, e-invoicing, e-customs, and all the things which you can do digitally if it's done properly. And this is dramatically accelerating the processes which you need to have the trade even more liquid and more fluent between in this case Canada and European Union.
My follow-up is I'd like to pick up on the CPTPP mention that you've dropped in front of us. So this effort to kind of bridge EU and CPTPP economies by Prime Minister Carney. He said in Sydney, I think 2 days ago, that this will effectively be under the WTO. He also said it's going to be a modernization of WTO rules. So is this kind of your working assumption that the EU CPTPP, the Super Free Trade Club, is going to be a kind of WTO type or WTO plus kind of structure? I'd like to know from you, Commissioner, how it's been pitched to you.
First and foremost, I would like to repeat my thanks to Canada, also to our friends in Australia and New Zealand, because they came up with that proposal. They've been pushing for making sure that European Union and CPTPP countries would enter into the new high-quality partnership. And I was very privileged to attend that meeting, which took place in Melbourne a few months ago. I think that it was very clear from the first moment that this is the group to be, this is the club to attend, and this is the work we should pursue, because you see that there was huge alignment about the current situation, but also future ideas between the European Union and our partners. And one of the big, I would say, deliverables there would be the fact that I'm convinced that if you look at it from the perspective of WTO, we are now a few weeks ahead of the WTO Ministerial Conference in Cameroon, and I think we share the same assessment with Canada, but also with many of the CPTPP countries, that small fixes for the WTO are not enough. That we clearly need to look at the opportunity which the Ministerial Council is offering to us from the perspective of pushing for serious reform. When we look at it from the retrospective of the last 30 years, we just have to conclude, and you see the evidence every day, that the global trade has dramatically transformed. We see some players who have expanded massively, but they are still keeping their own markets quite closed. We have seen that state support has grown. We see that distortion have multiplied. We see that overcapacity has become chronic, and therefore we believe that we need certain type of reset which would actually restore predictability, which would strengthen fairness and adds flexibility to today's economy demands. We want to make sure that we would guarantee the access to open, low-tariff markets in a case when it goes hand in hand with responsibilities to ensure fair competition. And therefore, we also put on the table as a European Union, and for the consideration to our partners for CPTPP, also the questions of the balance of the rights and obligations, because we believe that it's kind of essential to restore the trust in finding this proper balance, and in that way also into the multilateral system. So these are, I would say, few of the headlines and topics we are bringing to the ministerial meeting in Cameroon, and we believe that if together, and for sure we will be coordinating before the meeting, and I'm sure in Cameroon we will be there together, just to have the tangible, real positive outcome. And we also agreed with the minister this morning that one of the key elements would be not to look at the meeting in Yaoundé as a conclusion of something. We in European Union would like to see it as a start of much more intensive process, where we would not wait another 2 years for another ministerial, but have much more hands-on approach from the let's say political leadership to kind of make sure that we will create the momentum which would bring us new, reformed, efficient, good WTO, which would help the global trade, which would help respect for international norm, and which would help also in dispute settlement mechanism and all these things which are so missing today.
Yeah, and if I can build on that, look, Canada's taking a leadership role to really bring the CPTPP and the EU together in a bridging capacity. I mean, we're members of both trading blocs, and so the conversation is what more can we do on investment facilitation, supply chain resiliency, but also digital trade. We're talking a lot about digital trade and what we can learn from each other. What can we bring to the table there? And so these are ongoing conversations that we're having as a co-chair alongside Vietnam. I was just in Vietnam a few weeks ago. They chaired the CPTPP this year, and so good conversations on how we can bring best practices forward and make sure that rules-based trade is respected and actually works. And so it's not a matter of replacing one over the other, but it's really building upon what the WTO is doing. And so the conversations that we'll have as ministers in a few weeks in Cameroon will be very important amongst ministers. And it's not just a one-off conversation, it's an ongoing conversation to make sure that we're able to learn from best practices and really bring the two biggest trading blocks together.
Hi there, Julio Rivas from Agencia EFE. For the Commissioner, I would like to have your comments on President Trump's threats of ending all trade deals with Spain.
I think that, after these comments, we've been in, I would say, permanent touch with my very good friend, Trade Minister Carlos Cuerpo, and also with all our Spanish colleagues. And I think what is very clear here is the fact that all of us, we have an interest in respecting the agreement which we concluded with the United States of America in the July of the last year. And I think that there is interest from all EU member states to make sure that this agreement is properly implemented and respected. We heard the same from our American counterparts, that even after the decision of the Supreme Court, they are very much attached to this agreement, and we are in daily contacts with them. Of course, Spain is a very important member state of the European Union, so we are in full solidarity with our member states and the European Commission, who has exclusive powers in the area of international trade, would always defend the interests of the European Union, but of course all our member states.
And for both of you, you just mentioned the new tax that Washington is going to start implementing, I believe, in the next few days. Are you both sure that the United States is going to honor the deal that it has with the European Union and with Canada, and there's not going to be more surprises in the future?
I think I can start to respond to this question. Of course, I believe that the United States will honor the deal, because this was the reassurance I got from my American partners, but this was also clearly stated in the public statements of, in particular, Ambassador Greer after the ruling of Supreme Court was issued. So we are working on the basis that this agreement, which we had concluded in July of the last year, has to be respected from both sides. The deal is a deal, and we both should respect it.
Yeah, and maybe I can add from a Canadian perspective is the conversation with the U.S. are ongoing. Minister LeBlanc will be there in a couple of days to continue the conversation on CUSMA and what more we can do together. But it's not just us alone. It's industry talking on our behalf. It's Canadian workers, it's American workers that are really talking about supply chains and how intertwined we are, and that we really need to make sure that this trading agreement does work for the long run, for stability and for resiliency of our businesses. But at the same time, my job as the International Trade Minister is to look beyond North America, and so we have the European Union Trade Commissioner here today. We'll be continuing to follow up with other partners. I just came back from India a couple of days ago, where we launched our CEPA negotiations. I know the EU just concluded with India. India also concluded with the UK, with New Zealand, and so congratulations to my friend Maroš for getting that done. But we're focused on getting more trade agreements done, and so with India we've committed to getting that done this year, and so we're looking at all trading partners to make sure that we're giving Canadian businesses and workers that chance to export to other markets outside the U.S.
Thank you, Commissioner and Minister. This wraps up today's press conference. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right.